The sun had barely risen over the small town of Riverdale when Raj and Priya arrived at the local cafe. It was just like any other morning, the smell of fresh coffee in the air, the gentle chatter of early customers, and the familiar faces they'd grown to know over the years. The couple had been running Morning Brew for nearly a decade, struggling to make ends meet but finding joy in the community they'd built. "Another day, another dollar," Raj said with a tired smile as he flipped the sign from "closed" to "open." At 42, the lines around his eyes had deepened, telling stories of long hours and financial worries. Priya nodded, her hands busy arranging freshly baked muffins in the display case. "Let's hope it's a good one." The electricity bill came in yesterday. She didn't need to say more. They both knew their small business was hanging by a thread. The morning rush came and went, factory workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, teachers stopping for breakfast sandwiches, and the usual group of retirees who claimed the corner table for their daily gossip session. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that suggested this day would change everything. Then, just as the rush was dying down, the bell above the door chimed. A man walked in wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans that had seen better days. He might have been in his 60s, with silver-streaked hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. Nothing about him screamed wealth or importance. If anything, he looked like he might be counting pennies for his coffee. "Good morning," Priya greeted from behind the counter. "What can I get for you today?" The man glanced around the cafe, his eyes taking in every detail, the chipped paint near the window, the outdated menu board, the single ceiling fan that struggled to cool the space. "Just a black coffee, please," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "And maybe a moment of your time, if you can spare it." Raj, who had been wiping down tables, raised an eyebrow at Priya. They'd dealt with their fair share of strange requests over the years, but something about this man seemed different. "Coming right up," Priya replied, pouring the coffee while Raj approached the counter. The man introduced himself simply as Tom and asked if they were the owners. When they confirmed, he took a sip of his coffee and nodded appreciatively. "This is good. Really good," he said. "Mind if I ask how long you've been in business?" The conversation flowed naturally from there. Tom asked thoughtful questions about their cafe, their struggles, their dreams. He listened with genuine interest as they explained how they'd always wanted to expand, to offer more to the community, but the financial reality had kept those dreams just out of reach. "I've been watching this place for a week now," Tom finally admitted, surprising them. "I've seen how you treat your customers, how you remember everyone's names and orders. I've noticed you giving free meals to that homeless man who comes by at closing time." Raj and Priya exchanged glances. They hadn't realized anyone had noticed those small acts of kindness. "My car broke down last week," Tom continued. "I was stuck in town waiting for parts. Your cafe became my temporary office. And I've made a decision." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It was simple, with just a name and phone number: Thomas Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Innovations. The name hit Raj like a ton of bricks. Reynolds Innovations was a tech giant, and Thomas Reynolds was known not just for his business acumen but for his philanthropic work. The humble man sitting before them was worth billions. "I want to invest in your cafe," Tom said simply. "Not just money, but resources, connections, whatever you need to make this place everything you've dreamed it could be." Priya's hand flew to her mouth. "But why us? We're just a small-town cafe." Tom's smile reached his eyes. "Because you understand something many businesses don't, that success isn't just about profit margins. It's about people. About community. And that's a value worth investing in." The next few hours were a blur. Tom outlined his proposal: substantial funding to renovate and expand the cafe, with no strings attached except one: they had to promise to maintain the heart and soul of what made Morning Brew special. By the time Tom left, Leaving his card and a promise to send over paperwork the next day, Raj and Priya stood in stunned silence behind the counter. Did that really just happen? Priya whispered, her voice shaking slightly. Raj shook his head in disbelief. I think it did. They closed the cafe early that day, too overwhelmed to continue as if nothing had happened. Walking home in the golden afternoon light, they tried to process the encounter that would change everything. What if it's not real? Priya voiced the fear that had been nagging at both of them. What if he's not who he says he is? Raj squeezed her hand. Then we go back to exactly where we were this morning. We've got nothing to lose by hoping, right? That night, they barely slept. They talked until dawn, making plans, dreaming bigger than they had allowed themselves to in years. They researched Thomas Reynolds online, finding countless articles about the billionaire's rise from humble beginnings to tech mogul status, and his reputation for unexpected acts of generosity. As the first light of a new day filtered through their bedroom curtains, Raj turned to his wife. Whatever happens next, we need to remember this feeling. This is what it's like to hope again. Little did they know that the simple act of serving coffee to a stranded billionaire was about to catapult them into a life they could never have imagined. Their journey was just beginning, and Riverdale would never be the same again. The next morning arrived with the ping of an email notification. Raj nearly spilled his tea as he opened the message from Thomas Reynolds. It wasn't just any email. Attached were official investment documents, architectural plans for the cafe renovation, and a personal note that ended with, "Let's make this happen today." He wasn't joking, Raj whispered, showing Priya the screen. This is real. By noon, a sleek black car pulled up outside Morning Brew. A woman in a crisp suit stepped out, introducing herself as Aisha, Tom's personal assistant. She carried a leather portfolio and a warm smile that somehow put them at ease despite the surreal situation. Mr. Reynolds doesn't waste time once he's made a decision, she explained as she spread the papers across their small office table. He believes in your vision and wants to help bring it to life as soon as possible. The numbers on the investment documents made Priya's head spin. The amount was more than they'd made in the past 5 years combined. There must be some mistake, she said, pointing to the figure. This is too much. Aisha smiled. No mistake. Mr. Reynolds believes in going all in when he finds something worth investing in. He sees potential here that goes beyond just a cafe. As they signed the papers with shaking hands, Raj couldn't help but ask, why us? There must be thousands of small businesses more deserving. Aisha looked thoughtful. You know, I've worked with Mr. Reynolds for 8 years. He's always had an eye for authentic people. He told me that in a world full of businesses trying to seem personal, you two actually are. That's rare. The news spread through Riverdale like wildfire. By closing time, it seemed the whole town had come by to see if the rumors were true. Their regular customers looked at them differently, some with excitement, others with a hint of suspicion. Does this mean you'll be changing everything? Asked Mrs. Chen, who had been coming for her morning tea for years. Will you still have time to remember how I like my drink? Priya squeezed the elderly woman's hand. Some things will never change, no matter what happens. That evening, a team of architects and designers arrived to measure the space and discuss possibilities. Words like expansion, modernization, and brand identity floated around the cafe that had never been anything more than a humble hometown spot. As the last of the team left, promising to return with mock-ups the next day, Raj and Priya sat alone in their suddenly too small cafe. I'm scared, Priya admitted in the quiet stillness. Everything's moving so fast. What if we lose ourselves in all this? What if we forget why we started this place? Raj nodded, understanding her fears because they mirrored his own. Maybe that's why Tom chose us. Because he trusts that we won't forget. That night, they could barely sleep again, but for entirely different reasons. Their phones kept buzzing with messages from friends, family, and even people they barely knew. Everyone wanted to know more, to be part of the excitement, to claim some connection to the miracle that had befallen the owners of Morning Brew. "My cousin wants to know if we're hiring," Raj said, scrolling through his messages. "So does my old college roommate. And 3 people I barely know from high school." Priya laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "We're going to need to learn how to say no, aren't we?" Neither of them had expected the social complications that would come with their sudden change in fortune. The money hadn't even reached their account yet, but already the dynamics of their relationships were shifting. Already, they were being viewed as something different from who they had been just 24 hours ago. As dawn broke on the second day of their new reality, Priya turned to Raj. "No matter what happens with the cafe, we need to make sure we stay true to ourselves. Promise me that?" Raj took her hand. "I promise. We got this opportunity because of who we are. We won't forget that." Little did they know how challenging that promise would be to keep as their lives continued to transform in ways they could never have imagined. 1 week after signing the papers, Morning Brew closed for renovations. The small sign on the door promising "something amazing coming soon" did little to quell the town's curiosity. Each day, people pressed their faces against the papered windows, trying to glimpse the transformation happening inside. For Raj and Priya, life became a whirlwind of decisions. What kind of flooring would best withstand heavy foot traffic while still looking inviting? Should they expand the kitchen or the seating area? What new items should they add to the menu? Every choice felt monumental, as if their future hinged on selecting the right shade of blue for the walls. "I never knew there were so many types of coffee machines," Raj said one evening, his head swimming with specifications and price points. "Tom's team wants us to get one that costs more than our first car." Priya looked up from the stack of resumes they needed to review. With the expansion, they would need to hire at least 6 new employees. "Do you think we're in over our heads?" Before Raj could answer, his phone rang. It was Tom. "How's it going?" the billionaire asked, as casual as if they were old friends. "Aisha tells me the renovations are on schedule." "We're learning a lot," Raj replied carefully. Tom chuckled. "Feeling overwhelmed? That's normal. First rule of business expansion: you don't have to know everything, you just need to know who to ask." That simple piece of advice shifted something for them. They began leaning more on the experts Tom had provided, trusting the process instead of trying to control every detail. Meanwhile, their temporary fame in Riverdale created unexpected situations. People who had barely acknowledged them before suddenly wanted to be their friends. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about them. Even the mayor called, suggesting a partnership that would bring mutual benefits. "It's strange," Priya said to Raj as they walked home one evening. "Everyone sees us differently now, but we haven't changed. We haven't even done anything yet." The renovation team worked miracles. In just 3 weeks, Morning Brew was transformed. The space now extended into the vacant shop next door, with warm lighting, comfortable seating, and a state-of-the-art kitchen. A new sign hung outside, same name, but with a sleek, modern logo that somehow still captured the cafe's cozy essence. The night before the grand reopening, Tom came to see the finished space. He walked through silently, taking in every detail, nodding occasionally. "What do you think?" Priya finally asked, unable to read his expression. Tom turned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I think it's perfect. But more importantly, what do you think?" Raj and Priya exchanged glances. The truth was, they had been too busy to really take it all in. Now, standing in the quiet of their new cafe, they finally saw what they had created, a space that was unmistakably Morning Brew, but better. Bigger. Brighter. "It feels like our dream come true," Raj said simply. Tom nodded, satisfied. "Tomorrow's the real test." Are you ready? As they locked up that night, the weight of tomorrow's reopening hung in the air. Would their regular customers embrace the changes? Would the new staff understand the spirit of Morning Brew? Had they lost something essential in the pursuit of growth? Only tomorrow would tell. The grand reopening of Morning Brew arrived with unexpected drama. A line formed outside the cafe an hour before opening, stretching around the block. Raj and Priya watched from inside, both thrilled and terrified. What if we can't handle this many people? Priya whispered, adjusting the apron on her new uniform, another change that still felt strange. Raj squeezed her hand. We've trained for this. The new staff knows what to do. We're ready. When they finally opened the doors, the crowd poured in with excited chatter. Familiar faces mixed with curious newcomers, all eager to see the transformation. Mrs. Chen, their loyal customer, was first in line. Her eyes widened as she took in the sleek new counter, the expanded seating area, the digital menu boards. It's so different, she said, her expression unreadable. Priya's heart sank. This was exactly what they had feared, losing their connection with the customers who had supported them for years. But then Mrs. Chen smiled and added, "But you two are still the same. That's what matters." The morning passed in a blur of activity. The new employees performed admirably under pressure, and the kitchen handled the volume better than expected. By lunchtime, social media was buzzing with photos of the cafe, bringing even more customers curious to see what all the fuss was about. Not everything went smoothly. The new coffee machine malfunctioned briefly, causing a backup of orders. Two of the new hires seemed overwhelmed by the pace. And there was a moment when Raj looked around at the crowded space and didn't recognize a single face, a strange feeling in a cafe that had once been like a second home to everyone. As the afternoon wound down, an unexpected visitor arrived. Raj was managing inventory when Priya called him to the front. "There's someone here to see you," she said, her voice tight with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. A woman in her 30s stood by the counter, looking out of place in her expensive suit. "Mr. Patel? I'm Lisa Wong from Channel 5 News. We'd love to do a feature on your cafe. Local business gets billionaire boost, that sort of thing." Before Raj could respond, a reporter and cameraman appeared behind her. "Mind if we get some footage? Maybe a quick interview?" Raj froze. They hadn't prepared for this level of attention. He glanced at Priya, who looked equally stunned. We're very busy right now," he stammered. "It'll just take a few minutes," Lisa insisted, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Our viewers love these rags-to-riches stories." The phrase stung. Is that how people saw them now? A rags-to-riches cliché? Before Raj could find the right words, a firm voice spoke from behind him. "I'm afraid any media requests need to go through proper channels." It was Aisha, Tom's assistant, suddenly appearing as if she had been monitoring the situation all along. "Mr. and Mrs. Patel are not available for interviews today," she continued smoothly, handing Lisa a business card. "You can contact our media relations department to schedule something official." As Aisha expertly shepherded the news crew outside, Raj and Priya exchanged looks of relief and concern. This was yet another aspect of their new life they hadn't anticipated: public interest, media attention, the loss of privacy. Is this what success feels like? Priya wondered aloud. Because it's not entirely comfortable. A month after reopening, Morning Brew had settled into a new rhythm. The initial excitement had calmed, though business remained steadily busy. Raj and Priya had adapted to their expanded role as managers rather than do-it-all owners, learning to delegate tasks they once handled personally. But success brought unexpected complexities. One Tuesday morning, Raj was reviewing the weekly numbers when he noticed Priya in an intense conversation with Dev, one of their new employees. From their body language, something was wrong. What's going on? Raj asked when Dev had returned to work. Priya sighed. He's asking for a raise. Says he deserves more since the cafe is doing so well now. She lowered her voice. He also mentioned that his cousin works at the newspaper and might be interested in our full story. The implication was clear, a subtle threat of negative publicity if they didn't comply. Is this what we've become? Raj asked that evening as they walked home. A target? People thinking we're suddenly made of money? Before Priya could answer, her phone rang. It was Tom, calling from halfway across the world where he was attending a conference. Despite his busy schedule, he checked in regularly. How's everything going? He asked. Priya hesitated, then told him about the situation with Dev. Tom's response surprised them. This won't be the last time you face this kind of challenge. Success attracts all sorts of people, those who want to support you, and those who want to benefit from you. So what do we do? Raj asked. Set clear boundaries, Tom advised. Make decisions based on what's right for the business, not out of fear or guilt. And remember, you can't make everyone happy. The conversation gave them strength to handle the situation professionally. The next day, they sat down with Dev, explaining their compensation structure and future opportunities for advancement based on performance, not leverage. The meeting ended with mutual understanding, though a new wariness remained. As word of Morning Brew's success spread beyond Riverdale, unexpected opportunities emerged. A representative from a regional business association invited them to speak at a conference. A popular food blog wanted to feature their story. A nearby town's Chamber of Commerce reached out about opening a second location. It's all happening so fast, Priya said one night as they sorted through the various offers and invitations that had arrived that week. 6 months ago, we were worried about paying our bills. Now we're turning down opportunities. The most surprising invitation came from Tom himself. He wanted them to fly to New York to meet other entrepreneurs he had invested in, a chance to connect with people who understood exactly what they were experiencing. We've never even been on a plane, Raj admitted when they received the invitation. Priya looked at him, a slow smile spreading across her face. There are a lot of things we've never done before. Maybe it's time to start. That night, they pulled out an old notebook where, years ago, they had written down dreams for their future, dreams they had eventually stopped believing were possible. With tentative hope, they began adding new items to the list. The journey that had begun with a simple cup of coffee served to a stranger was taking them places they had never imagined. And it was only just beginning. New York City was overwhelming. The towering buildings, the constant noise, the rush of people moving with purpose, it was a world away from Riverdale. Raj and Priya, dressed in new clothes bought specially for the trip, felt distinctly out of place as the taxi pulled up to a sleek skyscraper in Manhattan. This is where Tom works? Priya whispered, craning her neck to see the top of the building. The elevator whisked them to the 52nd floor where Aisha greeted them with her familiar warm smile. Everyone's excited to meet you, she said, leading them through glass doors etched with the Reynolds Innovations logo. You're quite the success story. The conference room held 6 other entrepreneurs, all recipients of Tom's investments. There was a woman who had developed an app connecting farmers directly to consumers, a man who had revolutionized affordable housing in rural areas, and others with equally impressive ventures. Compared to them, running a cafe seemed suddenly insignificant. I don't think we belong here, Raj murmured to Priya. These people are changing the world. We just make coffee. Before Priya could respond, Tom entered the room. Despite his wealth and power, he greeted each person with genuine warmth, remembering specific details about their businesses and families. When he reached Raj and Priya, his face lit up. The cafe owners who reminded me why I started investing in small businesses in the first place, he said, shaking their hands. How's Morning Brew doing? The day unfolded in a series of presentations and discussions. To their surprise, when it was their turn to speak, the other entrepreneurs leaned forward with interest. Their questions weren't about profit margins or expansion plans, but about community building and customer relationships, areas where Morning Brew excelled. "You've created something special," the housing entrepreneur told them during lunch. "A true community hub. That's harder to build than most tech startups." That evening, Tom hosted a dinner at a restaurant overlooking Central Park. As the conversation flowed, Raj and Priya began to see themselves differently. They weren't just lucky recipients of a billionaire's generosity, they had earned his respect through years of hard work and genuine care for their community. After dinner, Tom took them aside to a quiet corner of the restaurant. "I have a proposal," he said. "I've been thinking about creating a foundation that invests in community-centered businesses across the country. Businesses that prioritize people over profit, like Morning Brew. I'd like you both to be advisors, to help identify and mentor other entrepreneurs who share your values." Raj and Priya exchanged shocked glances. "But we're still learning ourselves," Priya said. "We've only been successful for a few months." Tom smiled. "Success isn't measured in months or money. It's measured in impact. And you two have been making an impact for years, I just helped amplify it." As they flew home the next day, Raj and Priya were quieter than usual, processing everything. The cafe that had once seemed like their entire world had become a doorway to something larger. Their horizon had expanded beyond Riverdale, beyond serving coffee, to potentially helping others achieve their dreams. "Do you think we should do it?" Raj finally asked as the plane began its descent. Priya looked out at the clouds below them. "I think we already know the answer." Returning to Riverdale felt different. The town that had always been their entire world now seemed smaller somehow. Not less important, just part of a bigger picture they were beginning to see. Morning Brew was running smoothly under the management system they had put in place before their trip. Their staff had handled everything perfectly in their absence, proving that the cafe could function without their constant presence. "I think we should do it," Raj said one evening as they closed up. "Take Tom up on his offer to join the foundation." Priya nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. "But what about the cafe? This is still our dream." "Maybe our dream just got bigger," Raj replied. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as they prepared for their new role while maintaining their commitment to Morning Brew. Tom connected them with a business coach who helped them develop systems that would allow them to step back from daily operations without sacrificing quality. Not everyone understood their new path. Raj's parents questioned why they would complicate their lives when they had finally achieved stability. "You have a good thing going," his father said. "Why risk it for something uncertain?" Even some regular customers expressed concern when they heard rumors about the couple's new venture. "You won't sell the cafe, will you?" Mrs. Chen asked one morning, worry evident in her voice. Priya reassured her. "Morning Brew will always be our home. We're just expanding our family." Their first assignment for the foundation came sooner than expected. A small bookstore in a neighboring town was struggling to stay afloat in the age of online shopping. The owner, a passionate advocate for literacy, had applied for funding from Tom's foundation. As Raj and Priya walked through the bookstore, they saw echoes of their own journey: the worn furniture, the carefully handwritten signs, the owner who knew every regular customer by name. "What would you do?" the owner asked them, hope and skepticism battling in her expression. "The big chains have everything I have, plus coffee shops and online ordering." Raj smiled. "But they don't have you. They don't have this community connection." Together, they began brainstorming. What if the bookstore became more than a place to buy books? What if it became a cultural center for the community, hosting local author events, children's reading hours, book clubs, writing workshops? As they shared ideas, the spark of possibility reignited in the owner's eyes, the same spark that Tom had seen in them all those months ago. On the drive home, Priya was quiet, lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" Raj asked. "About how much has changed," she replied. 6 months ago, we were just trying to keep our little cafe afloat. Now we're helping others do the same." Raj reached for her hand. "And this is just the beginning." That night, they sat on their small balcony looking up at the stars. The same stars that had always been there, but somehow seemed vaster now that their world had expanded. "Do you ever wonder why Tom really chose us?" Priya asked. Raj considered the question. "I think maybe he saw something in us that we couldn't see in ourselves." "And now?" she prompted. He smiled. "Now we're beginning to see it too." 1 year after Tom Reynolds walked into Morning Brew, Raj and Priya stood before a crowd of small business owners in a conference center downtown. The foundation had grown beyond their wildest expectations, supporting over 30 businesses across 5 states. And somehow, they had become its public face, the ordinary couple who proved that success didn't require compromising values. "We don't have all the answers," Raj began, his voice stronger than it would have been a year ago. "But we've learned that true success comes from building community, not just profit." Priya continued, "Each of your businesses has something unique to offer. Our job is to help you amplify that uniqueness, not change it." As they spoke, Raj caught sight of Tom standing at the back of the room, nodding in approval. The billionaire rarely took public credit for the foundation, preferring to let Raj and Priya be its ambassadors. "Your story resonates more than mine," he had explained. "People see themselves in you." After the presentation, a young woman approached them. Her hands trembled slightly as she introduced herself. "I run a small bakery in my neighborhood," she said. "Everyone told me to go bigger, to standardize, to focus on efficiency over quality. But listening to you, I feel like maybe there's another way." It was a conversation they were having more frequently these days, reassuring small business owners that bigger wasn't always better, that success could be measured in impact rather than just scale. Back in Riverdale, Morning Brew had evolved as well. They had promoted their most dedicated employee to manager, allowing Raj and Priya to focus on the foundation while still maintaining the cafe's heart and soul. The new manager had introduced subtle innovations, local art displays, open mic nights, cooking classes, that had made the cafe even more central to community life. "We should thank her properly," Priya said as they drove home from the conference. Morning Brew might not be where it is today without Tom, but the foundation wouldn't exist without Morning Brew. Their lives had found a new balance. 3 days a week at the cafe, 2 at the foundation, weekends reserved for family and reflection. The pace was still demanding, but now it was driven by purpose rather than necessity. That evening, a notification pinged on Raj's phone, an email from Tom with a subject line that made him sit up straight. "Time for phase 2? "What is it?" Priya asked, noting his expression. Raj handed her the phone. The email was brief but momentous. "Ready to take the foundation international? Several opportunities in developing economies where small business mentorship could make a huge difference. Interested?" Priya read it twice. "International? Us?" The question hung in the air between them. A year ago, the idea of advising businesses beyond Riverdale would have seemed absurd. Now, the prospect of sharing their model internationally didn't feel impossible, just like the next step on a journey that kept expanding in unexpected ways. "Remember when our biggest worry was fixing the cafe's leaky roof?" Raj said with a small laugh. Priya squeezed his hand. "The roof doesn't leak anymore. Maybe that's a sign." They looked at each other, the same question in both their eyes: how far could this journey take them? And were they ready for whatever came next? 2 years to the day since Tom Reynolds first walked into their cafe, Raj and Priya found themselves in a small village in rural India. The humid air clung to their skin as they sat under a canopy, surrounded by women who had formed a cooperative to sell handmade textiles. When we started, we had skill but no way to reach customers beyond our village, explained Lakshmi, the group's leader. The foundation's microloans and business training changed everything. Similar scenes had played out across their 2-week journey, in Thailand, Kenya, Peru, and now India. Communities transforming through the same principles that had saved Morning Brew: authenticity, connection, and purpose. Did you ever imagine this? Raj asked Priya that evening as they sat on the balcony of their modest hotel room, the sounds of village life drifting up from below. Not even in my wildest dreams, she admitted. Remember when we thought success meant having enough customers to pay the electric bill? They laughed, but there was a touch of nostalgia in it. For all the good they were doing, for all the lives they were helping to change, there were moments when they missed the simplicity of their old life. Back in Riverdale, Morning Brew had become a case study in sustainable business growth. The cafe had expanded to a second location, operated by a team they had trained in their philosophy of community-centered commerce. Their management model had been featured in business magazines, and universities occasionally invited them to speak to students about ethical entrepreneurship. Tom had remained their mentor and friend, though his direct involvement had decreased as they grew more confident. My job was never to direct your path, he had told them. Just to clear some obstacles so you could find it yourselves. On their last night abroad, a message arrived from Aisha with a photo attached. It showed the original Morning Brew cafe bustling with activity, a new mural on its wall depicting the journey of coffee beans from farm to cup, a project the staff had conceived and commissioned themselves. They wanted to surprise you when you get back, Aisha's message read. Tom says it reminds him of why he walked in that day. Some places just have a special kind of magic. Priya wiped away an unexpected tear. It's still our home. Raj nodded. And now we're helping others build their homes too. The next morning, as their plane soared above the clouds, they discussed plans for the foundation's future. There would be new challenges, new businesses to support, new communities to engage with. The work would never be finished. Do you ever regret it? Raj asked suddenly. Taking Tom's offer? Our lives would be so different if we hadn't. Priya considered the question carefully. I think we would have been okay either way. We were always good at what we did, always cared about people. Tom just helped us see how much farther that could go. As the plane began its descent toward home, Raj thought about the strange, winding path that had led them here. It had begun with a simple cup of coffee served to a stranger, proof that even the smallest acts of kindness and quality could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. We helped a billionaire, Raj said, smiling at the memory. And he helped us back, Priya finished. But the real story was always about helping others find their way too.